we express and we live in our own lives, or try to the best of our ability, you want to understand them on a deeper level. So for the next few weeks, what we're going to try and do is host a couple of longer conversations, half an hour every week, so that we can all kind of take some time to reflect. And yeah, like let's go deeper. Like every one of you are our valuable listeners, and we really want to give you the experience that you're after and the knowledge that you are seeking. So this week, what we're going to do is we're going to introduce a speaker who we have, had on the platform many times before, Vijay, and we're going to have a really, interesting conversation, I'm sure, about some of Vijay's own personal journey into Vihangam Yoga, as well as the most important concept for a seeker to understand as they are proceeding on this path, which is the mind. The mind is something we can talk about forever and ever, and it's one of many concepts, but it's arguably one of the most fundamental ones as we try to dip our toes into the ocean of spirituality. So without further ado, let's go to our conversation for this week. Of course, if you have any questions, thoughts, concerns, do keep sharing them on slido.com/VYGOF. I'm sure that, over the next few weeks, as we go deeper and deeper, things will pop up. If they do, please do share them with us, and we'll find a way to answer to those questions. So now I want to introduce Vijay. Vijay, I hope you can hear me.
Yes, absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here with you, Abhinavji. Thank you.
Gigi, absolutely. So Vijay, do you mind just, for the listeners out there, just giving us a quick introduction about where you're from, perhaps, what you do day to day, and then let's get into it.
Sure. Well, it's a question that reminds me that am I from the land where I work, or am I from the land where I'm born? I'm basically from India, and I'm born in a city which is known for the spiritual enlightenment called Bodh Gaya. And early in my life, I was in touch with. Basically, I'm born in Vihangam Yoga family, so I was always in touch with yogis and saints. So grew up in that environment. It's my fortune. My career-wise, I chose to be an engineer, so I'm a software engineer by profession. My mind, my intellect is there too, and my heart and soul is in spirituality. So have been following Vihangam Yoga practices since childhood, and I'm very grateful for it. Thank you.
Gee, that's so interesting to hear, actually. The entire journey that you've had is probably very interesting with a lot of insights. If I could actually ask you a bit more about your childhood even, because I'm sure some of the listeners here are interested. You mentioned that since you were a kid, you had the opportunity to interact with many yogis and saints. What is the most, let's say, interesting or striking piece of advice you got as a child that you've carried with you onto, let's say, foreign lands like America in your career?
To be frank, when you are a child, then some mesmerizing things have a lasting imprint on your mind. You won't believe what actually attracted me towards yoga and spirituality, because it was a magical thing. What happened that there was a saint who visited our home when I was very, very child. I don't know how young I was, maybe 4 years, maybe 5 years, 6 years, I don't know. Yeah. But I still remember everything. There was a saint, we used to call him Nepali Baba, and he had a very strong body, and he lived with us in our family. And one day he did a magic. What he did, he lied down on the floor, and my elder brother, who is the toughest man in our house, he asked him to move his feet. Nepali Baba asked my brother to move his feet, and my brother tried hard to lift his feet, and he was not even able to shake it.
Yeah.
And then he asked my younger brother to do the same. And when my younger brother touched his feet, it was so soft, as if all of a sudden Nepali Baba was able to transform his body from a rock stone to a soft cotton.
Yeah.
So I was mesmerized. What is this happening? Is there some other science that we are not exposed to? That is when I got very curious about this. Yeah.
Right. So you saw that, and obviously that's a very incredible experience, and it reminds me of a lot of the stories we hear of saints in India, right? Even when we get exposed to the spiritual path. When did you start diving into, let's say, the deeper philosophy of spirituality? Was it after that, or like, do you recall?
Oh, well, in the child, you don't go so deep into the spiritual concepts or so. It's more of an adventure for you, just involving yourself into activities. So when I was child, fortunately, my house is very close to one of the beautiful ashram of Vihangam Yoga called Madhumati Ashram. Madhumati Ashram is in Gaya itself.
Yeah.
I truly feel very blessed to be very close to that ashram. So since I was about maybe 6 years or 7 years onwards, I have been visiting that ashram because it was also on my way to my school. So
Wow.
while going to school, I'll just go and get darshan of Swamiji's. There's a statue and all over there, and the photo and also. And while coming back also, the reason being we also used to go to ashram was because of the fact that in our place where I live, it is a place where the power looms. We are by profession a weaver. My family, my generations are weaver. So there are a lot of power looms, the engines that keep running. It's very noisy environment.
Yeah, right.
In that noisy environment, we have got used to still do our study and do everything. We were used to it. But then suddenly, if you happen to be in a place where there's no noise, you feel so serene, so peaceful. So for that experience also, I have been visiting ashram regularly. And of course, when you be in certain ambience regularly, you develop certain kind of character within you, certain liking, natural liking towards that. So that's how I got in touch with the activities of the ashram. Used to get involved in several seva, we call it, right, in ashram activity. And I grew up in those kind of environments, so it has become like integral part of my life.
Wow.
I cannot separate myself from ashram and activities like that now.
Yeah, that's so amazing, right? Like for myself, I've always been based abroad, and I never had that opportunity to go deep into the ashram. So I'm definitely feeling from you that vibe of the ashrams, like, and how it's changed you. Why do you think the ashrams are, so different as a place? Especially, considering, even these days when I go to India and I have the opportunity to go to an ashram, it's exactly as you described. It's very serene. It's very untouched. Why do you think that's the case? What is so special about ashrams?
It is something like this. When you go to a garden where you have fragrance of flowers, you will certainly feel that fragrance because you're in that ambience. In another word, if you dip yourself into, let's say, you take a shower of something which is very full of fragrance, then when you come out of the shower, people will also smell that and tell you that there's something very amazing about when you cross by. I feel a very good fragrance out of you.
Yeah.
I feel that the ashram is a place where you acquire those fragrance in your character, because it is a place where you're transformed by the feeling of the people. Because people there are not for selfish motive. People are free from selfishness, and they are just doing the stuff that the guru has set things for. So they're not living for themselves. They're living for the service, and that very feeling of living a life of selfishness will start reflecting on everything that people do in the day-to-day life as well. So it's very natural. Your heart will feel good being in those kind of ambience, because I don't know, for some reason I feel that the world will become heaven if the entire world will become ashram. That's what I feel.
Yeah.
So why the ashram is only that much boundary within that boundary? Why not expand that boundary and make the entire world a ashram? That's what I truly feel. Such a beautiful place to be in.
Yeah. Yes, I definitely feel the same. Like whenever I go to the ashrams, I meet such, selfless and kind people that it makes me feel almost embarrassed because I look at myself and I see the imperfections in me, and and then they tell me, like, you don't have to be so harsh on yourself. Keep growing, keep learning. So when was the first time? Is it when you were in the ashrams, or when you were growing up? When was the first time you were exposed to the concept of the mind?
Well, it is very difficult to say that what was the point when I was exposed to it. But if you talk about conceptually, then of course, when I started reading the most auspicious scripture in Vihangam Yoga called Swarved. Swarved is a book which, I can undoubtedly say that it is encyclopedia of spirituality. You seek any concept in spirituality, you will find a mention of that in Swarved. And it was so mesmerizing that the Swarved is full of concepts around mind. Not one, not two, more than 200 couplets just on mind. So that gave all dimensions about how mind works. Where is it placed in the body? What is it composed of? How does it come in contact with the soul that we are? What is the nature of the mind? How it transforms from one state to another state? There are several concepts, and it is so crystal clear that it will start affecting your life the moment you be very clear about what is mind and how I can transform mind from one state to another state. You can immediately start implementing those concepts and truly live a life which you desire. That is the beauty of the impact of Swarved in my life.
Yeah. And that's exactly, what we as listeners obviously want to understand, right? A lot of the things you just mentioned about the mind, like so many questions pop up, especially in this modern era where the mind is discussed so much. You have concepts like mindfulness, you have, the people who run stress management classes speak about the mind. Myself, I'm also a software engineer. So perhaps as engineers, why don't we have a discussion on the definition of the mind first? Because that's what we do as engineers. How does Swami define the mind in the Swarved?
Absolutely, yeah. Just think like this. The most touching concept, the fundamental question that we find in Swarved is, as we know about the other parts of the body, if mind is so important, everybody talks about mind. People understand there's something called mind. And in their day-to-day conversation also, they use the term mind. But our master or the spirituality asks this very fundamental question. We know about the location of our eyes, our hand, our leg. Where is the mind located in the body? That is the first thing. The moment this question is raised, automatically the very fundamental concept about mind is clear. That means mind is a unilocated entity. It is not an abstract concept. It has to be an entity then. Then only we can talk about location of the mind.
Yeah.
As we are very clear about where is my hand, where is my leg, so should be a place for something that exists. So it made this very clear. The curiosity naturally arises within us that if mind is something for which you can ask this question, where is it located in your body? That means it has to be an entity. It cannot be an abstract concept. So it began from there, and then the Swarved says that the mind is an entity. It is an atomic entity. It is something which captures the subject from our indriyas, from our sensory organs, and pass on the experience to the soul. And that is how we come to experience something from our senses. So this brings out another clarity that, okay, so mind is an entity that exists. It is an atomic entity, and it also has the capability to interact with the senses as well as the soul. I'll take the privilege of my language and I'll read out one doha from Swarved. It says,
yes, please do.
It says, Atma Yog man se rahe, man indriya kar saath. Indriya Yog jab arth se vishay gyan jivanat. It makes it very clear that how the interaction of we as a spirit happens with the worldly subjects. It says, soul connects to the mind connects to the senses, and senses connect to the subject. Only when this entire channel is established, it is then that the subject comes into the experience.
Right.
So this is so fundamental about how you can be very effective, very efficient in life. It's very clear that what you need to establish to be focused, to be attentive of what you're doing. So this is very fundamental about mind. There's so much more as we discuss, we'll know more.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's these kind of definitions which really, even when I was exposed to them, I can't even locate it when, but when I was exposed to them, like you said, when they're represented in such a clear way, you start to see them to a certain extent inside yourself.
Right.
And it really is a very interesting experience. So you mentioned a few things about the mind there, about almost like how it's like an interface, right, between the inside and the outside in a way.
Right, absolutely, yep.
Yeah, so the question arises then, and this is one that I remember asking when I was, let's say, younger, not that old anyway, but let's just say, which is the mind physical or is it not physical?
Right, so this is where it goes a little deep now, and I'm so grateful that I had Swarved. I'm in touch with Swarved, in touch with people who have experienced the mind. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Our Guru says in Swarved that, look at your body. Your body, you can touch your body, the parts of the body. So anything that you can touch with your hand, that means it is very physical, right? So anything which is very physical, which you can touch, is definitely made of the physical fundamental atom, of which this entire creation that you can see with your gross eyes are made of, right? So that much is very clear. But this body that you see in front of your mirror is not just the gross body. There is also a subtle body inside it. And the subtle body is composed of 19 elements. And out of those 19 elements, there are 4 elements which are called 4 inner organs. They are intellect, mind, chit, and ahankar. These are the 4 inner organs. So mind is one of them. Now, out of these 4 inner organs, again, the 3 inner organs are composed of the same fundamental atom which our gross body is made of. But it is only the mind, which is neither made of the inert matter nor made of the consciousness that the spirit is. But as we understand that mind is an interface between inside and outside. By that we can understand, even by its form, it is actually, if you draw a line and you say that, this is an origin called the center, and left to that is, let's say, inertness, and right to that is the consciousness, then the origin itself is the state of mind. So mind lies between the inertness and consciousness. It is truly an interface between the consciousness and inertness. And that's why being in that particular state, it is able to establish connection between the soul as well as the subject outside, and bridge between them for soul to have experience of the subject. So this is called, in yogic term, this is called an entity which is agantuk chetan tattva. Now, of course, for those who don't understand this language, agantuk chetan tattva is an entity which will behave like inert if it is not having consciousness in it. But being agantuk chetan tattva, it means that it has capability to derive consciousness in it and then act like a conscious entity. So without consciousness, it will be like as inert as any other object that you see around. But being agantuk chetan tattva, being at the origin, being at the interface between inertness and consciousness, it has the ability to shift itself either towards inertness or towards consciousness. So the moment it come in contact with the soul, the spirit that we are, which is full of consciousness, it also borrows the consciousness. It derives the consciousness from the spirit and become conscious. It becomes conscious and then will become functional. So mind is that kind of entity. In yogic term, in Swarved term, it is called man. We are talking about man. So this man is an agantuk chetan tattva. It is something which derives consciousness from the soul and then act like a conscious entity. Yeah. Thank you.
Right. So to clarify, some of us confuse 2 things. I know I did before, which is some of us think the mind and the brain are the same. And we confuse the 2, right? So sometimes when people say you have to, the mind, you have to control the mind, people immediately picture the brain, like the mind is the brain. So that is, from what I'm understanding and from what I've understood, that is not true, correct?
Absolutely, that's not true. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
That is not at all true, because for the fact that, our guru says that, which is very deep now, little deeper also, in the sense that, in what is the process of formation of the gross body? The gross body is being formed inside the mother's womb. And it is only then the brain is also developed. So brain grows within the mother's womb. And then, of course, as you come out as a gross body, you still grow your body and brain. Or maybe not, maybe you don't grow brain, but yeah, at least we sharpen it and make it more effective. But size grows. I see people's head growing. So of course the brain grows, yes.
Yeah.
But But mind is not something which is born or developed within the mother's womb. Mind is a separate entity.
Mm.
The subtle body, which is made of 19 elements, is preformed, and it is the subtle body that enters into the mother's womb and then grows another layer called the gross body. So mind is already an entity which is developed, and it's already associated with the soul before even you enter into the mother's womb and grow your gross body.
Mm.
It's a different entity. It's a different entity.
Right. So how does it work then? So we've got the mind, we've got the brain, we've got the body, we've got the nervous system too.
Right.
So let's say that I'm thinking about something, like I'm speaking to you, so I'm thinking of something I want to ask. So then how does it work? I think of something, that thought is in my mind, and then it travels, it enacts my speech, and then I say it. Like, what is how do thoughts and actions kind of,
Right.
like, we have thoughts and actions, we have the brain and the mind. How do they kind of come together?
Yeah, absolutely. So just think about a machine then. Just think about a machine. A machine, because our body, look at the body. What is body? Is body a conscious entity, or body by itself is just made of the inert matter, right? The body is made of inert matter. It's just that there is a conscious entity inside which is making this body lively and conscious. But body by itself is an inert entity. Now, if you see any machine which is devoid of any electric signals, of course, it will not function. There will be no activity in that. So to make the body act, it requires the signals, electric signals, impulses.
Yeah.
So there has to be some generator within the body. Just like in my village, when the electric power was not that frequently available, we had to turn on the engine to, continue with the power supply. Yeah. So there has to be an electric power supply within the body. Yeah. That is what is done by the brain. The brain provides all the electric impulses for any movement to happen in the body, for in fact any changes in the body, whether it could be at the emotional level also. There are certain chemicals that are released in the body, and brain is responsible for all that. So in a way, that whatever changes you see happening, the hand movement, leg movement, or emotion change because of the chemicals changes in the body, all that requires a certain engine, and that is what is the brain. But what determines that you are attracted to certain subject, or there's certain subject, that certain thought that starts running in your head? Is it the brain? Of course not. Brain is not a conscious entity that it will have any kind of desire or something. Does chair have desire? Chair never has any desire, right? Because chair is an inert entity. Similarly, brain is an inert entity. It is just inert entity. And any inert entity, as our guru defines it very clearly, the difference between a conscious entity and inert entity is this, that if any entity has the desire, the power of action, and the knowledge, if one is having these three attributes, that means that particular entity is a conscious entity. And anything which is devoid of these attributes are inert entity. So when you talk about thought, by that we understand, if brain is an inert entity, brain cannot be responsible for the thought in your head. Thought must be coming from somewhere else. And it must be having connection with something which is already either preserved within you, which rises from within, and then you start contemplating on that subject, or something coming from outside. So if you think about it, who is the entity which is responsible to capture something from outside? It is the mind. It is the mind that captures subject from outside. But then, what is something within you which is responsible to raise the related thought, related subject, which you start contemplating, you start weaving together a series of thought. Something, some source has to be within you which preserve your maybe preconcepts or something, some event or the life moments which has already happened in your life. And that is what is called chit. As I said, that out of those 19 elements of subtle body, there are 4 inner organs. So one of those inner organ is called chitta. So chitta is an inner organ which preserves every life moment. So all that you have thought of, that you have worked on, every moment is being captured as a video recorded. The video recording is on all the time. And that is how you are able to recall your moment. Somewhere it has to be preserved. As a software engineer, we understand there has to be some database which will preserve all the data. And this is a beautiful computer made by God that we have a never-ending, the space is not going to be ever consumed. It is never-ending database within us called the chitta. So chit contains all life moment. And this is where we'll understand that the mind is responsible even to activate chit. So whatever comes in your mind, that becomes a trigger for a related subject to rise from chitta. So what mind does it, our guru says very clearly that chit by itself is a dead entity. It is an inert entity. So to make it functional, it has to be in contact with something that carries consciousness. And the only entity within the body which is mobile, going from one part of the body to other part of the body is the mind. It is only mind, the only organ in the body which is mobile in nature, which moves from one place to another place. So when you close your eyes, it also moves to your chitta. And it is something like, in software industry, we write a select query to fetch the data from a database. So does mind do. Mind starts fetching data from chitta, and the breathes, which is automatically, also active and rising from chitta, becomes the feed for the mind. So mind receives those breathes, which is nothing but a sample of thought. And that's how thought starts coming within our head.
So that's really interesting, firstly. Thank you for explaining that. That's very interesting. I know we're going to have many more conversations in the future. I still have a bucket load of questions that I want to ask you. So just let everyone, and let's reconnect again.